Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today we're going to look at our fall beets. I started these seeds indoors 5 weeks ago and transplanted them out 2 weeks ago. Our spring beets I only watered 7 days after I transplanted, but it's so hot now in the summer. For the fall beets, I've continued to water them every day if it hasn't rained, and it's been a very dry July. Just like the spring beets, I've spaced them 4 inches apart. Now the spring beets had limited sun. They were planted along here. But these fall beets are going to have full sun. So I'm curious how that's going to impact their size. The spring beets, they were ready in 11 weeks. So for the fall beets, that'll put the harvest in October. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. It is the beginning of August and time for our first eggplant harvest. The variety is Black Beauty, and the fruit average 5 to 6.5 inches. Mosquito, excuse me. So many of these are ready. I transplanted them out in mid-May, and they really struggled in this cold spring. They stayed small, but we've had several heat waves and they've just taken off. Some are 4 feet tall. The average size is 2 to 3.5 feet, but mine have gotten to be 4 feet. Wow. One reason they grew so well is because I planted them in full sun and I spaced them the proper distance apart. Like the pepper plants, which are right here behind me, which I'm trying not to break, I watered these eggplant transplants for 7 days, but haven't watered since. Now we had a lot of rain in the spring, but after June 1st, we haven't had much rain. But spring helped it send down deep roots, and it's been managing our dry spell well. Eggplants like rich soil, and this area is full of organic matter. I raised quail here for 4 years, so I have not fed the eggplant. Now, if the fruit looks dry or off color or stressed out, especially along the bottom, I go ahead and harvest it, no matter what size it is, because experience has shown me it's not going to get any bigger. Another reason I suspect they've grown so large is they've been protected from flea beetle damage. So the onions are right on the other side of them, and I didn't want the squirrels digging in my onions, so I netted this whole area, and a benefit was it has protected these eggplant, and they've had minimal flea beetle damage. Now this plant is stressed because it's been moved from the grandkids' alley garden. I was just overwhelmed with that garden. It was requiring way too much water. It was so dry because it's a raised bed. So I think it was 4 or 5 days ago, I moved it over here and I'm seeing new leaves. Now as the old leaves die off, I've been trimming them, but new leaves are definitely growing. It has a few small fruit, and I'm going to go ahead and harvest those because the plant needs to put its energy into growing new leaves. Now look at this one. These are not Black Beauty eggplant. It's a good example of what's been happening since 2020, when more people got interested in growing food. Seed companies got overwhelmed with orders, so they have hired more small farms to grow for them because seed companies don't grow their own seeds. So this means that the seed I bought in 2023, the Black Beauty seeds, had some other variety mixed in. Whoever grew those seeds probably grew them too close to another variety of eggplant, and it cross-pollinated. I have no idea what they are, but I'm going to harvest them and enjoy them. That bottom tells me that it's not going to grow any larger. If I wait for these small varieties to get bigger, they'll get tough. So I'm going to harvest most of these. Because it's been such a dry summer, some of the bottom leaves, they will turn yellow, and I just prune those off to make the plant look better and to cut down on pests being drawn in. This is another one of the grandkids' eggplants. So I'm going to go ahead and harvest these fruit. There's plenty more to harvest later. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today it's time for an August garden tour. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. It's the beginning of August and it's time to harvest the onions. These are the long day varieties, Walla Walla and Sweet Spanish Yellow Utah. It's ideal to wait until the tops fall over on their own to harvest. There's less chance they're going to sprout in storage because it means they're finished growing. But today we're going to harvest them all because what's left over from Hurricane Debbie is bringing 4 inches of rain here to north central Maryland. The red onions were ready last month, and I already harvested those. Yesterday's video was me using those red onions to make a braid. These onions reached their full size for several reasons. I planted them in full sun. Onions prefer full sun. I gave them the recommended amount of space. I did not trim the tops from the time I sowed the seeds indoors. And I followed Dixondale Farms watering recommendations. I also gave them enough time and waited for the tops to fall over. Now let's bring these into the garage and lay them out to dry. Now if it was nice, hot and sunny weather, you could leave them out in the garden. But like I said, rain's on the way. Now, if you remember, near the house, we had another row of onions planted. And I harvested those last week. Let's get the rest of these pulled up. Now, if you feel any soft spots, go ahead and bring those in the house and either use them up or chop them and put them in the freezer. I only found 3. Some of these onions could have been harvested before now, but I was trying to wait and save them all for the video. I think this one's the biggest. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. We have a break in the rain. We've already had 2 inches and the worst is yet to come in about an hour and a half. So let's take a chance to do our second harvest of eggplant. Now remember, this variety is Heirloom Black Beauty, and it's grown from my own saved seeds. Last year was the first time I've successfully saved eggplant seeds. I wanted to harvest them now for a couple of reasons. Before the heavy rains break the plants from the heavy fruit, and tomorrow while it's raining, I want to be able to make some videos to show you how I prepare and preserve eggplant. Now, do you remember this unknown variety? Hang on, it's wet out here. This is from bought seeds that I had bought last year, and that means some odd eggplant variety got mixed in. Now, I used the ones that I harvested, and the skin's really hard, and inside it's full of seeds. Fortunately, the seeds are pretty soft. So I'm going to harvest this second one and then harvest some small Black Beauty eggplants and show you how I stuffed them. Oh, the mosquitoes are terrible. Wow, there are so many fruit. So I'm gonna go ahead and harvest the big ones, of course, and the small ones for stuffing, and then I'm gonna leave the medium-sized ones. Remember, they started these seeds indoors in February under lights in the basement. And I transplanted them mid-May. I think they were about 6 inches tall. Then we had a cold spring, and they stayed really small. They didn't really grow, and some of their leaves fell off because they were stressed out. But now, wow, they're more than 4 feet tall. This has been my best eggplant year ever. Bee is already back to work in just this short break from the rain. It's good. It means there's going to be more fruit later. Wow, there are so many. That's okay, because I love my eggplant. Now, the 7 days after I transplanted them, I watered them, but after that, I haven't watered and I haven't fed them. They've taken care of themselves. Now we're going to bring this in the house and we'll just leave them on the counter overnight. They'll be okay out of the fridge. Got a few more still developing, and after this rain is finished, more flowers will grow and we'll get more fruit. Curious if this 4 inches of rain that's coming is going to make the fruit swell. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today we need to hurry up and harvest the sweet red peppers before what's left over of Hurricane Debbie arrives. I think about an hour and a half. We're expecting 4 inches of rain. And since last night, we've already had 2 inches. I'm concerned that the heavy fruit will cause the pepper branches to break. Cold front moved through last night, and like I said, we've already had 2 inches of rain. So these peppers are full of water. This is the heirloom variety sweet red Ivarsky peppers, grown from the seeds that I've been saving for several years. Sweet peppers are my favorite vegetable to grow. Now if it's still a little bit green, I'm going to go ahead and leave it. Now see how all these are the same height and then this one's just giant? It's because, remember, it was planted next to the compost. And while all these other ones struggled in the cold spring, this one had the warmth radiating off of the compost, so it grew really big, and it's also in rich soil. But interestingly, it's just now setting fruit. So the fruit is way behind the other plants. Now I grow in a small space here in north central Maryland in a historic downtown rowhouse. And this yard is very thin and narrow, so I'm trying to be careful I'm harvesting and not break these pepper plants. But the okra is right here, and so is the fence. Now that first plant we harvested from, and then this little guy here, these are from the alley, from the grandkids' garden. But that raised bed dried out so fast because from June 1st till now, we haven't had much rain and lots of heat waves. But the peppers have done well since I haven't watered them. So these two plants I had to move here 2 weeks ago. They're smaller than the rest of the peppers, but they're still producing fruit. There's plenty more. They're going to be red soon. Then these plants are going to set their second set of blossoms, and we'll have more fruit before the fall freeze. Now, if there's some that are still green before the freeze, just pull up the plants, leave the roots, hang them upside down, and the fruit will ripen themselves. I'll make a video about that much later. Bring them in the house and make a video showing you how I preserve and use them. Sweet and green peppers are easy. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Look, 12 years ago, this was the level of my soil. Through the last 12 years, with using no-till gardening, I have built about 12 inches of new, rich soil. Because these bricks were free, I've used them to build up a wall. But every year, the weight of the soil makes them tip over. So it's time to fix them. Now, how have I built up such rich soil? Well, every year, typically in the fall, I lay down cardboard and I put a fresh layer of mulch on top. And below the cardboard is last year's old mulch and any plants that I've chopped and dropped. And underneath that cardboard, they break down and build soil. Now, the different mulches that I have used in the past have been hay, straw, fall leaves, and I've bought wood chips. No-till and no-dig. What does that mean? Excuse me, there was a bug. It means that I don't till the soil every year. Why do I not till? Because soil is alive. There are millions of microorganisms, roots, air pockets living there. Tilling breaks up that life cycle. I don't need to fertilize my garden because all this rich organic matter builds such rich soil. Now in 2011, I was hit with rheumatoid arthritis, and I had to find an easier and simpler way to garden. Sheet mulching with cardboard in the fall, it really prevents and blocks most of the weeds. Laying down the cardboard and a thick layer of mulch also holds in water. Most of this garden, I never water. Oh, I do water young transplants about a week after I've planted them. I do water my carrots, my strawberries, my blueberries, and any container pots that I have. Now, spring and summer in this area we had squash, onions, and broccoli rabe. Tomorrow I need to plant our fall cabbages because it is mid-August and it's my last chance. Now I need to finish building this wall and then I'll show you the soil. I'm satisfied with that. Now let's scoop the soil back over. Now, like I said, last year's cardboard is already broken down, and here's an example of what's left. Most of it is just gone. Worms love living below cardboard. Last year I used fall leaves as a mulch, and they're so light that the cardboard just blow away. So I secured it with landscape pins. Now's a good time to pull up the ones from last year. I use cardboard basically because it's free. But if you're concerned about toxins, you can buy a big roll of garden-specific paper. Most of the fall leaves have already broken down too, and it was on thick last year. I've tried weed fabric in the past, but I felt like it dried out my ground. It actually created big cracks. That's why I prefer cardboard. Now, best practice with cardboard is to remove the tape. But honestly, I rarely do that. I just have too much work to do. So now any tape I find, I pick up and throw away. Now all this soil in the front will settle, and rain will help with that. Now I've already pulled out the pins for about half this area, but I need to work on the back half. Now, where that pin is, that was the area, the level of last year's soil, and what I removed was the mulch. And you can see 1 foot down, it's still very rich. Now it's ready for the cardboard, and then the red cabbage and the fall vegetables. When you lay down the cardboard, make sure to overlap them because weeds will grow through the cracks. Now, because I'm going to mulch with fall leaves, I'm going to go ahead now and secure it with these landscape pins. It's not exactly beautiful, but functional. I don't want to buy wood chips. Oh, forgot to mention when I was scooting the soil here in the front, it's mixed with a lot of mulch. But that's okay, because I'm not going to plant right up in this edge. I'm going to plant more set back. You never want to plant directly into mulch. You always want to punch through your cardboard and plant directly in the soil. Now, if you want to use packing paper, my experience is it doesn't last. For me, either animals dig it in it or it just breaks down and tears really easy. I prefer cardboard. You need a little bit more in the back, but this is good enough to get the red cabbages planted. Next, I need to set up my hoops because I've got to protect the cabbages from cabbage worms. I've learned to do it first. If I plant first and then run out of time, I'm in trouble. So I've learned, set up the net first. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today it's time to set up the tunnel for the fall cabbage. Now these tunnels that I'm going to use are called super hoops. They're taller and wider. Spring was the first time I used them, and I really liked them. Now first I'm going to show you all the supplies because I found a few hacks to help them work better. Now for one hoop, you're going to need 2 pieces. They're going to connect in the middle to make one hoop. And the 2 pieces are going to connect in the middle with 2 connectors. They're not going to be tight. They're going to be loose, and that's okay. Because I don't want to lose some of the pieces, let me show you how I stored these. These are designed to support a low tunnel. They're not designed as a trellis or as an arch. Used that way, they're not going to be enough support. Now they do have a few weaknesses, and one of those is the very bottoms. It's the same down there. Where they stick into the ground, they're very short. They're not deep enough. Second, because they're tall, they can be unstable in the wind because the netting or the fleece, they catch the wind and cause them to sway. Third, do you see this crossbar? It's sharp on the edges and it can tear the netting or the fleece. You have to be careful and make sure to turn that to the inside of the tunnel, not on the outside. And last, I noticed that because in spring it rains so much and the netting holds moisture up against the hoop, some places in the metal have started to rust a little bit. But all those things are fixable, and you can hack them and make them really successful. I'm really liking these super hoops, and I want to invest in more of them. Unfortunately, they're not cheap. Now, in my best experience, space them 24 inches apart, 2 feet. That gives them the most support. Now I'm going to give them some extra support with some garden stakes. And use 2 and zip tie them to the edges. Now I do a no-till, no-dig garden method, and every fall I lay down cardboard. Then later I come back and I top it with mulch. That blocks the weeds and holds in the moisture. But today, since some of this is fresh cardboard, it's going to be kind of hard to poke through, so I'm going to use a dipper to help make some holes. Because these are short on the ends, I'm going to secure them with some landscape pins. Because I'm going to grow cabbage in this area, I want to space them 48 inches wide, 4 feet, and I've already measured that. The netting has to be 10 feet wide. Typically, in the past, I've bought 8-foot wide netting, but it has to be 10 feet. The edges are going to need to be weighed down, and I tend to use sandbags, but they're not all full of sand. Some have rocks in them, some have bricks, and others just have regular soil. And the zip ties are to attach the stakes, and the netting we're going to want to zip tie it in the corners. The netting is so thin, it's best to secure it at the corners, not typically like you do in a tunnel where you gather it in the middle of the hoop. You're going to want to gather it at 4 corners. So 4 zip ties and 4 pins for that. Face the zip ties towards the inside, not outside where it'll snag the netting. It helps to push down and then connect. Kind of awkward because I was trying not to block the camera while I was filming it. It made it a little harder for me. Now let's do this again. 2 pieces for one hoop, 2 connectors for each hoop. Space them 24 inches apart for the best support. Now this is 38 inches tall because I spaced them 48 inches wide. In the past I have put them 40 inches wide and it's made it a little bit taller. Now first measure, and the best way for me is put one of the stakes in 24 inches apart. Then to put the first piece in. This is new cardboard, so it's really hard. And this doesn't have to be exact. This one's a little bit crooked, but that's okay. Next, you're going to add the green garden stake. I already had these. I use them a lot to support my plants, and it's my favorite way to add support. I have a variety of sizes of these. Then you're going to zip tie the stakes to the super hoop. Make sure you turn those zip ties in so they don't poke the netting. And I forgot to mention, put that crossbar on the inside, not the outside. Then secure the bottom with the landscape pins. Last, you need to connect them, and that is the hardest part. And remember, the connectors are going to be loose, not tight. Push down. And I tend to hook my thumbs through the cross piece. And push. Because I've already used these, the very last one's kind of crooked. I accidentally put it in upside down of how I used it in the spring, but it'll be fine. I can always kind of bend it later. Remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. Now, let's do this one more time. Remember, the connectors will be loose. Push down. Hold your thumbs on the crossbars, push down, then connect them. In the spring, I bought 100 feet of the 10-foot wide netting, and I use it on 2 or 3 tunnels. So I'm not sure if I already have a piece cut to this size, so let's see. So first you want to drape it over and make sure the ends go all the way to the ground. And you're going to want to weight the corners first. Then you're going to fix the sides. And over 2 or 3 months from using this, it is going to stretch. We'll adjust this some more. So we did 4 corners in the middle of the ends first, then the middle of both sides to make sure it was even, because 10 feet wide is just barely enough for these hoops. Now make both sides tight. Pull them also to make them not just tight going over the arch, but tight along the bottom. Now work on the corners. Start with the cut end. See, it's still loose right here. I'm going to gather that up. you're going to wait on the zip tie because you might have to come back and adjust this some more. When we finish the 4 corners, then we'll zip tie it. Now I went around to work on the other side because I want to do the other corner of the cut end. Both of these first. There's a bug. This end is really long, but I'm not going to cut it because you see these beets in front of them is planted lettuce, and I'm going to harvest that soon. And I plan to take off this netting and add more super hoops over here to cover these beets because they're going to get really tall. Squirrels will dig them if I don't put something back over them. And the ones on the edge, they're just going to push up against this netting. Now the last corner. Now I want to zip tie all 3 other corners. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today it's time to plant out the fall cabbages. This variety is Red Acres cabbage. I'm going to space them 24 inches apart for a good large head size. And I'm going to distance them in rows of 24 to 36 inches because it's really going to leaf out. I'm also spacing them 24 inches from the end of the tunnel because I don't want them up against that netting. I'm giving them more room than I did my spring cabbages. I only gave those 12 inches apart, so I felt like that was a little too crowded. Now these plants are 6 weeks old. I started them from seed under lights in the basement at the end of June. I'm going to want to plant them all the way up to their first set of true leaves. Cabbages are heavy feeders. Every 2 weeks you can give them some fish fertilizer. But my soil is really rich. If you've noticed, I've laid down this cardboard over last year's leaf mulch. And that's going to break down. And I've been doing that over 12 years, building rich, healthy soil. So I don't tend to feed my plants. Cabbages prefer full sun, and in the spring they were planted over there in partial shade. So I'm curious, giving them more space, 24 inches instead of 12, and more sun, I'm curious how it's going to affect their head size. Now you see the yellow sticky papers. These are going to help control whiteflies and gnats. I'm going to see them around a lot more often now that it's getting cool. It's turned chilly overnight. We're also going to use some organic slug, pill bug, and snail control. And yesterday, prepping this area, I found a snail. Here, let me show you. I'm going to have to protect these cabbages from cabbage worms from now until harvest. And if you notice, while I had them hardening off, I also had them protected with a net. Don't want those white cabbage butterflies laying their eggs on even the tiny transplants. Cabbages prefer 1.5 inches of water a week. And for the first week, the first 7 days, you're going to want to water them every day. And I will be topping that cardboard with mulch. I'm going to use fall leaves, so we're going to have to wait a bit. Here in north central Maryland, this is my last chance to plant my fall cabbages. Right now is mid-August, and they're going to be ready to harvest mid-November. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today it's time to pull up the sweet red Ivarsky peppers, and we're going to hang them upside down in the garage for the green fruit to ripen. I did this last year in October before the first frost. So many of my peppers were big, but they were still green. I hung them in the basement and it worked. I harvested so many more red peppers. I've already pulled up their support stakes, and that's why they're flopping over. Now I just put some nails up in this beam, and I've used some zip ties around the stem to hang them. Last year I experimented. I compared cutting the plant off and leaving the root in the ground and pulling it up with the roots on, and the plants where I left the roots did so much better. The ones where I cut off the root, the fruit wilted really quickly. You see how the dirt fell off? Last year doing this in the basement was a huge mess and a lot of work carrying them down the stairs and hanging them up. So putting them in the garage is going to be much better. Now it's only mid-August, and the first set of fruit is still turning red, and the second set of fruit is just setting. They're small, so why am I pulling up the plants now? It's because my freezers are full. And because I want to plant fall green beans in this area. Now the peppers are not going to continue to grow, but they will change color. I'm going to leave this one plant. It is absolutely giant and it's just started to set fruit. So if you've done any reading about growing peppers, you'll read the warning not to overfeed your peppers because they'll grow really big, beautiful leaves and plants but have less fruit. And this is a good example because it was planted near the compost. And after we planted these mid-May, it was cold and the plant struggled except for this one plant. It shot up because of the warmth radiating off of the compost, but it's just now setting fruit. Now, if you notice, some of the peppers are ripe, and some are still partially green, and some are fully green. So after we finish here, we'll harvest the ones that are ready. Now you're going to need to check the fruit every day and harvest the red ones. Now the leaves are going to wilt and dry out, and that's fine. But if the fruit starts to wilt, you're going to go ahead and want to pick that. Because last year, most of them stayed firm. And if they wilted, they don't really change color. They're just going to rot. Now, after the leaves wilt, then I'll be able to see the peppers better, and I'll count them, and I'll film an update. Good morning, and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today is mid-August and it's time to direct sow our Chinese cabbage, the Napa variety. Now in this area, the cabbage is going to get full sun, but Chinese cabbage needs a minimum of 3 hours of direct sunlight every day. It can handle partial shade. I want to space these out 12 inches apart and 18 inches from the edges. That means this tunnel needs to be 36 inches wide. Now these are tiny seeds, so you just want to lightly sow them and sprinkle just a little soil on top. Don't bury them. Now for fall Napa cabbage, you want to sow 8 to 10 weeks before your first frost. Right now, we're 8 weeks before our first frost, so this is perfect. August is also perfect because Chinese cabbage benefits from daylights that are decreasing in hours and temperatures that are getting cooler and cooler. In the spring, they can tend to bolt because temperatures fluctuate so much. If they have consistent temperatures below 50 degrees, they will send up that flower head and bolt. There's much less chance of that in the fall. The seeds are going to germinate between 40, hang on, let me check my notes, 40 to 85 degrees, but they prefer a temperature of 75 to 85. So this is perfect because most of our 90-degree days are done. They're going to germinate in 3 to 14 days. I'm sowing 3 to 4 seeds in each spot, and I'll go back and thin later down to 1 each. Now keep the seeds moist until they germinate. Then after that, they're going to need 1 inch of water every week. The sticky papers, they're going to help control white flies and gnats. And the Sluggo is going to control slugs, pill bugs, and snails. The net is going to protect from the cabbage worms. I love these hoops. Now if you look, the red head cabbage, those hoops are spaced 48 inches apart, 4 feet. Where the Napa, it's 3 feet apart, 36 inches. So you can see the difference. So the red cabbage, they're a little bit shorter. I think it was 38, 36 inches tall. Where the Napa cabbage, putting them closer together makes it taller. It works either way. Now on recycling day, I'm going to get more cardboard. And we'll go back and finish sheet mulching this area. And later, we're going to mulch this with fall leaves. And because I lay down cardboard in the fall and put down new mulch, I build rich organic soil underneath. Everything breaks down. My garden is full of organic matter. And for that reason, I don't have to feed my cabbage, even though they are heavy feeders. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. That's a bunch of house sparrow fledglings. They're funny. It's mid-August and it's time to direct sow our fall green beans. Now these are heirloom contender bush beans from my own seeds. I've been saving seeds for several years. I want to space them 4 inches apart. And I've already measured it out and set up these stakes. And I want to space my rows 24 inches apart. Because they're a big seed, you want to plant them 1/2 to 1 inch deep. Green beans prefer full sun, and in this area, they're going to get full sun. They prefer temperatures 70 to 80 degrees, and that's perfect because most of our 90-degree days are over. We might have some once in a while. They're going to germinate in 7 to 14 days. Now I'm going to put a net over them to prevent birds from pulling them up and animals digging in this area. Now once they grow pretty tall and they're established, I'll take off the net and the hoops because they're going to get 12 to 20 inches tall. They're going to bush out 12 to 18 inches wide. And because their genetics comes from a pole bean decades ago, every once in a while you're going to get a vine. It's in their genes. This heirloom 1949 bush bean produces a 5 to 6 inch long, tender, stringless bean. They prefer fertile soil, but you don't have to feed them because they produce their own nitrogen. My soil is very rich in organic matter because I raised quail here for 4 years. Right now, daytime temperatures are in the 80s and the 70s, and that's perfect because they will stop setting flowers over 90 degrees. That makes fall the perfect time to grow green beans. I'm going to harvest them when they're young and thin and tender before the bean swells up in about 50 days. So we should be able to get a harvest before mid-October when we have our first frost. Now, my experience, they do need some support because as they get heavy, they will tilt over. So I've got these stakes all ready to go. Now, keep the seeds moist, and then after germination, they're going to need 1 inch of water a week. We're going to add organic Sluggo to protect from pill bugs, slugs, and snails. Now let's cover up the tunnel with the netting to keep out the wildlife. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. It's the beginning of August and time to sow the fall carrots. Spring carrots were planted here, and I had prepared that area for the fall carrots, but decided to put some beets there. So recently I redug this carrot bed to make sure the soil was nice and loose, 9 inches deep, and removed more rocks. Now, these are an heirloom carrot, and I'm using my own saved seeds. So they're going to look a little different than they're used to because they still have some of the plant debris mixed in. Experience has taught me that this variety is best grown with rows spaced 6 inches apart. And I'm going to use these garden stakes to mark that out. Now I'm going to remove the garden stake and sprinkle in the carrot seeds. Later I'll come back to thin them 3 inches apart. That's going to give me the best size for the cosmic purple carrots. Can you see those tiny carrot seeds? I measured 6 inches from the ends because the spring carrots, the ones that were planted near the edge of the netting, were just too crowded. The netting brushed up against the leaves and they suffered. So I've spaced them back 6 inches for the fall. Cosmic purple carrots tend to be about 6 to 7 inches long and about an inch in diameter. They're not tiny, but they're not a really big carrot either. Now this soil also has sand mixed in. That's from raising quail. They use the sand for their dust bath. And I've also added peat moss to make the soil more loose. Now carrot seeds require light to germinate. So don't put a thick layer of soil on top of them. Just lightly sprinkle on some loose, fine soil. Now water in gently. You don't want to flood them and for the seeds to all get washed off. They should germinate in 10 to 25 days. Summertime, it tends to be quicker. But don't let them dry out. Water every day. Now, tomorrow, what's left over from Hurricane Debbie is coming here to north central Maryland. We might get 4 inches of rain. So these seeds might all get washed away, but if that happens, we'll just sow again. We'll see what happens. We need to put the netting back on to protect from the digging wildlife. Thank you for visiting Withrow Urban Homestead. See you later. Bye-bye.